Hello, and welcome to the Exponential Growth Podcast, powered by Analyst Investors. I'm your host, David Olivencia, co-founder of Analyst Investors, and a passionate advocate for leveraging innovation and technology to drive success. Let's get started. This is Exponential Growth. I also want to give gratitude to Salvi Media. They're the founding sponsor of the podcast. They're a premier executive content agency dedicated to crafting exceptional content and strategies that elevate companies' brands and their executives. They're creators of the Emmy Award-winning CEO series. I think many of you have seen that. We've also featured one of my portfolio companies, Analyst Investors and Hallow, on their CEO series. And they've had in-depth interviews with CEOs talking about their personal journeys and business experience. The CEO series can be found on Cheddar, Entrepreneur Magazine, Reach TV, and really want to thank Salvi Media for their support of the podcast. You can also follow them on social media, as well as they have a podcast studio in Chicago. Join them as well. So again, thank you, Salvi Media, for making this podcast possible. All right, everyone. Well, hey, welcome to another edition of the Exponential Growth Podcast. We have a very exciting show today with a great guest, leader I've known probably good 10-ish years or so in Notre Dame circles and Irish Angel circles and board of directors circles, but really has an amazing perspective on board governance, leadership, tech. Actually, he's invited me to do a class at Notre Dame where he does some teaching on the side as well in the business school. Let's welcome to the show Greg Hedges, who is the president and CEO of the National Association of Corporate Directors Chicago chapter, and a founding managing director at a cool company that we'll talk more about called Protiviti. Welcome, Greg. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you, David? And thank you for having me today.
All right, well, Greg, hey, as a way to kick it off, just like we always do, please give our listeners a bit of your story and background.
Thanks, David. Of course. Well, my journey has really always been about building bridges between strategy and innovation, between technology and leadership. And I spent the first part of my career as a partner at a firm called Arthur Andersen, which went under with the Enron debacle and really gave me the platform to help launch Protiviti, where I serve as one of the founding managing directors. And we grew that startup into a $2 billion global consulting firm. And so that experience really gave me a front row seat to the challenges and the opportunities that companies face when trying to grow and transform and stay ahead and stay relevant. So along the way, as you mentioned, it was actually for 9 years, I've taught emerging tech and tech leadership in the Master's in Business Analytics program at the University of Notre Dame. So I had the privilege as part of that of having thought leaders like Peter Diamandis actually appeared in my class. And I had his book, The Future is Faster Than You Think, as one of my texts. I never had text books in an emerging tech class. It doesn't even sound right, but he really talked about predicting the future and the convergence of technologies. And so that's really been the theme a lot of what I do. And I serve on the board also at the business school at Dominican University, which has been fun. And you guys, Analyst Investors, are up for a big award at the big gala this spring from Dominican.
Yes, we are. Well, we have a great partnership with Dominican University, an amazing, for all listeners out there, right outside of Chicago, amazing university, what they're doing, growth. Their dean of their business school, phenomenal leader, really transforming that business school and all the leadership there. So we're going to be receiving an award there in, I don't know, a couple of weeks. Honored to do that. And we partner with them with interns and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, great organization, Greg. Thanks.
It's terrific. 3/4 of those undergraduate students are first gen college students, which is just an amazing pool of talent. When you're looking at a predictor of success, it's somebody who's first generation college, right? So I'm excited to work with those students as well. Yep.
Excellent. Well, great story. And, and then you're also as part of this, the National Association of Corporate Directors, Chicago chapter lead. You get a great visibility into amazing board members who are leading governance, providing strategy to a lot of entities. So that's sharp. It's not only have access to them, but you're a leader, right? You're a thought leader. You share perspectives there. And I think I just want to underscore, to start a company and let alone it be successful and live, but let alone get to a $2 billion in revenue. That's phenomenal. And it's a testament to your leadership. And obviously it was a team as well, but you're a founding member there. So I think it's a great, accomplishment as part of your story, Greg, that you have. So kudos to you, that team at Protivity. It still keeps going, right? You still kind of
Well,
get
it
to.
does. And the twist on that is it wasn't even just a startup from zero. I mean, we were radioactive. I mean, when you came out as a partner from Arthur Andersen, particularly in the Chicago market, where Andersen was the lead player of those firms, and you could get a meeting with anybody you asked to get a meeting with, to then be radioactive because your firm had been
Fair.
indicted by the federal government. We actually started from a negative, and so it was particularly challenging to get rolling and to get growing. And we're just so thrilled. We started with 650 professionals world. So it really has been a lot of fun. And it became a platform for me. That's how I got involved with board members, David, because when we started Creativity, we had to play at a big level. We had to sell big projects, and we were just brand spanking new. People couldn't even pronounce our name. It was like Protiviti or whatever. And I didn't care what they called it.
It's Italian, Protiviti.
Right. I just wanted to get our contract signed, and particularly when the attorneys were making fun of, and I didn't care how they made fun of pronouncing our name, but the idea was I needed board members who would not veto us at the decision when management were to recommend that Protiviti was going to come in and help them build out new business processes or to help them with their financial reporting. It was important for us. And that's when I started to reach out and build relationships with board members in Chicago. I remember the very first was Blythe McGarvey, who was on the board of Accenture. And Accenture actually hired us as one of the very first clients to hire us without even having a name. And it was a lot of fun to just continue to build on those relationships. Cheryl Francis and Carrie McMillan and Steve Kaplan, many people would just continue to connect with us so that at least our name was understood and who we were about, so that when management could recommend us, and that was a big player. But that's how I got to know board members. And so when it came time to get connected with the National Association of Corporate Directors, I became a member over 20 years ago, and I've been working with the chapter for a couple of decades. And so when it came time for me to do less at Protiviti, I thought it would be fun, and I reached out and suggested for me to step in as a leader. And they never had a CEO before in this role. It was largely an administrative role in the past. And so we worked to transform the board from one of an operational board to a strategic board. And I took on a lot of the responsibilities that the board members used to have to worry about. So.
And, and I've been, member, I was on the board of the New Jersey chapter of the NACD back maybe 15-ish years ago when I lived in New Jersey. And for those who are listening, if you have an aspiration to serve on a corporate board, the National Association of Corporate Directors should definitely be an organization that's on your radar. It's, you build the competency, you build the network, you learn about board scenarios, and it begins to build your track record as a step. And even you can serve on different committees and get involved. So highly recommend that. And that was a stepping stone for me. Now I'm on 2 corporate boards. Wintrust's old Plank Trail Bank board, charter board, and then Sure's Communications.
Yeah,
Sure's
Sure's, I
Communications.
remember.
Yeah. So,
That's awesome.
so you have this view, you have this, so it's Exponential Growth Podcast, right? All these amazing trends that are going out there. You have the great advantage of not only watching these trends in your job and leadership over the years at Protiviti and working with clients, but then also working with CEOs and board of directors on how they're thinking about all this change and exponential growth and disruption. What are some big, call it trends, two or three things that you see that are really kind of creating a lot of energy, or that they're talking about that they want to know more of, and where should leaders, where their focus is at right now?
Yeah, let me step back on this, because CEOs and boards, they do not like noise and detail. We have to understand, when we're talking to CEOs and board members, what is it they're after? What is the why about faster decisions? Is it better insights? Is it new markets? What is it that they're going after? And then that's where we kind of take that concept of convergence and to suggest, is quantum even part of it? Quantum is great for a couple of specific types of business problems. Classical computing is not going away. It's going to be the majority of computing for a long time, I think forever. So the idea is, are there certain types of questions that need to be answered? So we try to anchor on the why. What is it that and what are you trying to do? And then no buzzwords. We got to use metaphors, right? I'll spend the night before a meeting figuring through what are some decent metaphors that we can use in terms of describing how AI can dynamically work to solve a business problem. We worked with Ally Financial, for example, on using kind of a quantum-inspired algorithm to model risk in portfolios more efficiently. So you could just create a portfolio of 20 stocks. And in fact, the CIO of Ally won an award at the CIO 100 Awards out in California a year and a half, 2 years ago, because of our work with them on this. They inspired us to work with them. So that's just an example. We've got to use specific examples of how will the technology solve a problem or answer something for them. So
Yeah, and then with Ally, so then they were looking at 20 or so. Can you go through how they were using that again?
the way it was you could model out of the S&P 500. How do you model and compare which of those stocks would most closely align with the actual behavior of all 500 of them? And a classical computer would have taken forever to go back and forth. It's like, is this the combination? No. Is this the combination? No. It could have taken thousands of years. But we used the annealing, which was a form of quantum computing, to be able to simultaneously look at combinations of stocks. And that's where we said, okay, looks like 20 of it. You could create a portfolio that models the behavior using these 20. And I might be missing a 25 or something like that, but it's been well written and we've talked about it. And maybe in the show notes, we could include some information about this. Happy to do it.
Oh, yeah, there you go. And then some of our listeners out there may have heard of quantum computing, but may not be totally familiar with it. How would you explain quantum computing to my grandma or my abuelita?
Yeah.
In very, very simple terms.
Of course, quantum computing is just an additional way of being able to process information, and it forces subatomic particles to behave in a certain way that quantum engineers worry about. I don't. And here's just another example. The traveling salesman problem has been around forever. Imagine there's a traveling salesman wants to go to 20 cities, but he wants to go in the shortest route possible, and he doesn't want to go back to any other city. It's just got to be in that way. A classical computer would take 2,000 years to figure that out, because it's going to say, is this the correct route or is that the correct route, back and forth.
Right.
Whereas a quantum computer, if you kind of think of it, a classical is zeros and ones. We've always heard that, right? A classical computer, it's either the bits are on or off. Well, if you kind of consider flipping a coin is a 0 or a 1, right? Heads or tails. But while it's flipping, it's in multiple stages at the same time. And that's called superposition. It's just a concept that classical computing can't perform, whereas quantum can. So during that, using that processing power, it's able to calculate what is the best route in a matter of seconds as compared to 2,000 years. So fundamentally, if you can take a business problem and put it into a quadratic equation, it is a good candidate for quantum. So if your mind doesn't think like that, that's fine. I've had our team on the phone with clients, and the clients saying, well, what about this problem? And the guys on the call are trying to figure out, is that a quadratic equation? Try to figure it out. And right, because you just have to think like that.
Yeah, no, it does. And look, I'm a big fan of quantum, and multiple, I get to speak with a lot of leaders to talk about, hey, AI is big right now. Everybody's talking about AI, but they say, hey, well, but AI has been around for a while, and you should have been talking about it 10 years. The real leaders were thinking about it 10 years ago, right? Now it's a big thing, right? The question is, what should we be thinking about now that's going to be the big thing 10 years from now? And one of them, I think, is quantum, right? I mean, quantum it is going to be huge because it's the engine. It's the engine and the power to do a lot of these amazing things, right? And if you think about the power, then how it's going to impact, medicine and health, to financial services, right? To just logistics and all these hard, complex problems with multiple variables to drive efficiencies, right? You're going to be doing that. And you think about space and space exploration, which is big, and all the challenges and the type of manpower, compute power you need to do that. You're going to get that from quantum. So it is a big, huge exponential trend that we're keeping an eye on. And I'm glad you brought it up, and I'm glad that I'm here on my network with all the expertise in it as well, Greg.
Well, it is. And the thing is, again, it's going to be about convergence, David. I mean, imagine being able to take the power of quantum computing to enhance the ability of AI models to learn more faster, and how much additional data it can ingest to be able to get to the training of models. That's the power of this. It's all going to be in the convergence of these technologies, and that's what boards and CEOs need to be able to look around the corner and see what's going to displace them. What opportunities are we just walking past because we're choosing to be confused? We don't want to, everybody wants to talk about, well, it's 3 to 5 years out, so it buys them some time and delays the requirement for them to make a decision. So Ally and other companies like them are smart to be able to just say, although quantum isn't at a stage yet that it can go into a common production model, we can model how quantum works, so you can figure out now what are the problems it solve. So when it does become of a faster, have more capacity, how would we be able to use it? So that's the concept. You got to be ahead of the game, otherwise you're just going to be in the dust.
Well, that's exactly, this is why we're doing the podcast. So all these listeners out there, to get you ahead of the game, right?
Yes.
we want you thinking like AI 10 years ago, right? So you're thinking, how can I position myself to be where the puck is going, not where it is, right? Kind of thing. So
That's
so
what it's all
quantum,
about.
keep an eye on quantum for all those who are listening now. A lot of conversation about AI over the last several episodes. This one's on quantum. It's one to definitely keep an eye on. So now let's talk. So exponential growth, you got trends, you got investing. So now with all these trends going on, how are you looking at investing, one? And then two, how do you see people placing their bets? I mean, you talked about Ally, right? Ally as an example. They're saying, hey, quantum is an exponential growth trend. We're doing some experimenting with it. We're trying to model
Yes.
it, and there's other companies that are doing it, but maybe you can just talk a little bit, maybe how you are thinking about investing in these things, and then also the boards and the companies where and how they're placing bets on these curves of exponential growth.
Glad to. Well, with full transparency, I personally have not done a great job picking winning stocks or betting on angel investments. I joke that at the Irish Angels, people just invested in what I didn't. They got after 10 years there. I was like, they were afraid when I'd pick a stock. So,
Greg is
uh,
investing. No, find the next one. Don't invest. They talk about the Kramer portfolio, right?
yes.
Whatever Jim Kramer talks about for angel investing, Greg is the anti portfolio.
Yeah, it was Irish Angels, but I thought of it more over time. It was more of a ministry than a moneymaker for me. It was just, helping people who, I thought were, I just wanted to help out. But I'll tell you, in terms of how others should probably think about it, um, I would focus on ecosystems, not just the big names. It's not about picking out the next Google. But it's maybe identifying hardware companies and data platforms and infrastructure players that are all enabling innovation. If you look at the quantum infrastructure and ecosystem here in Chicago, it's absolutely amazing. Kate Timmermans, the CEO of the Chicago Quantum Exchange. We've been friends for years. When I say we, in this case, it's Protiviti has been a sponsor there for years. And we work with academics, which of course it's the University of Chicago and 4 or 5 other academic institutions that are all combined, along with Argonne and Fermi. And if you look at the brand new companies that have started in quantum in Chicago, it's amazing. So it was actually, I think, back in 2018 when the federal government just kicked $1 billion aside and said, "Hey, let's start investing in quantum," and because the Chinese had already made some announcements that made everybody nervous in terms of their advancement. So I think this idea of looking at ecosystems and placing bets on a number of the pieces there would make some sense rather than just trying to pick one or the other. Um, and then I'd say take a look at the trends that play out over time. Quantum, AI, biotech, they all kind of evolve in waves. And you're not really investing in today. You're investing in the longer horizon. And you just can't get too tied up in looking for next quarter results or anything like that with this stuff. Chasing alpha is great, but an alpha is just kind of a fancy word of having more return, what are better returns than average, right? Than the S&P that we talked about. But in emerging tech, I would say education is probably your best investment. Get smart. The more you understand, the smarter your bets are going to be. Don't invest in stuff that you just don't understand. I think you've got to get into it. And there's plenty of material out there. And if you don't have the heart for that, then it's probably not a space for you to be messing around in.
Oh, thank you for those perspectives on investing. And yeah, I think it's definitely what right? There's
Yes.
there's lots of different investments out there, right? The question, what do you know? What are you comfortable with? What are the platforms? What are the moats? And just investing in yourself, right? Education, learning, studying a lot of these trends that we're talking about, because in the future you're going to be a better professional, you'll be a better investor, you'll be a better leader, and you'll be ahead. And then when you so now with whether it's the NACD, Protiviti, what excites you about the future and what's next for Greg?
Well, still for the future, I'll tell you, I'd encourage everybody to take a look at this AI 2027. Even
Okay.
it's just a 2-year horizon, hundreds of pages of prediction that's really pretty objectively written. And that's by the AI Futures Project. And it's AI-2027.com. I just think you take a look. And you're going to have to get smart on that. For NACD and Protiviti, here's a wonderful convergence there. On September 17,
Okay.
the NACD Chicago chapter will be hosting kind of our Converging Technologies Summit at the Microsoft Technology Center. So a variety of our sponsors like Accenture, KPMG, Protiviti, many others will be showcasing. And what I'm doing is I'm moving the NACD Chicago chapter to one of primarily education around board governance, to using the education as a platform to build relationships, right? You can use AI to go learn and ask any question you want, right? There's all sorts of ways to get questions answered and information. The idea
Yeah.
is to find people that you want to compare notes with. And that's what our relationship building platform is all about. And I use AI to connect people even at their tables. It's like, here's the 122 people we had last week at an event. And how do we organize and put together tables of people who have similar backgrounds and maybe different backgrounds so that they can compare notes and let them know in advance who's going to be there. That's what it's all about. And so I'm excited about our event coming up at Microsoft Center at the Aon Center in downtown Chicago.
Well, and it's a great example of, by the way, that's September 17th. So for those in the Chicagoland area, you don't have to be in Chicago to attend either, but that sounds like a great one. It's a great way. It's a great win-win-win, right? And this is a Stephen Covey principle, right? Your sponsors win because everybody's kind of coming to their location. Your members win because they're going to learn something at, a world leading company who's really doing a lot of transformation in Microsoft or Accenture and others. And then the relationships that they're going to make on top of it. So it's like where can you get that, right? And then these connections can make bigger things happen as well, and then you build a stronger organization. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that in my book Networking Excellence, which is back there or there, I also interviewed you, Greg, right? Because you had the other network that you're part. Actually, we didn't mention it, right? It's the Notre Dame Business Network here in Chicago. Yes. So you talk about networking and networkers. And networking excellence, you're looking at and listening to one of the greats who really, look, he networked his way to help build a $2 billion company, obviously with his team and others. He's a part of a corporate director network, a very, leadership, strong executive network, right? And then obviously with Notre Dame, at least in the Chicago area, right? Notre Dame, one of the strongest alumni networks in the world, right? Has built that here in Chicago. So Greg, kudos on that front, and I'm sure from what in the future, very exciting, very very exciting future you have as well. A lot of great things to come.
Yeah, the whole idea is connecting dots of, for example, with collaboration. Maybe there's a half dozen people who are our members and our sponsors, and they, in advance of our meeting in September, maybe want to work on answering a question like, how should AI be used in the boardroom during strategy sessions, or even just to cover minutes? Some boards are like, get out of here. I don't want these things recorded and documented. Others find the amazing efficiency of it. So that's the idea, is how do we get people together and just think about some of these challenges and then do a readout over 5 or 10 minutes at our event. And so I think that's what's exciting about relationship building. When people have something to work on together, they have an opportunity to get to know each other a little bit better. And that's what we're all about.
Exactly. Well, hey, Greg, thank you. I know you got a lot of things going on. Thank you for making it a priority and coming on the Exponential Growth Podcast. How do our listeners stay connected with you and follow you on social media and others, and NACD, et cetera?
Yeah, that's easy. If you go to LinkedIn, Gregory Hedges, I better be the top one that pops up. I think I'm close, and find me there, and I'm connected, and be glad to connect with you. And also, I'll be inviting you to our page of the NACD Chicago chapter. So look for that invitation if you come visit me.
Excellent. Well, again, Greg, thank you for your perspectives on exponential growth. Wishing you, the NACD chapter, Protiviti, the alumni in Chicago for Notre Dame, continued success. And again, thanks for being on the pod.
Thank you, David. It was an honor.